Oh, oh God. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Gabesty here. This is Galakras, and this is the normal raid guide. So feel free to click on the annotations if you want any of the other guides or videos for this fight. Otherwise, let's get started. Now, for your raid composition, you're going to want 2 healers, most likely, and 2 tanks. If there was ever a fight in this zone that we've seen so far that screams for 2 healers only, this is it. Basically, your raid's going to be split up very frequently. So it's a nice compromise to have 1 healer with each tank and then 3 DPS in that setup. So we'll get to that in a second. But that would be my recommendation. There's not a severe amount of damage until the very end, and as long as you use raid cooldowns properly and handle those mechanics, you should be okay. So the overall goal for this encounter is to wait for the towers on either side of your raid to open up, defeat all the enemies up there, and use the guns on the top of the towers to shoot down the drakes, eventually shooting down Galakras herself and engaging her and defeating her in combat. During this period, you have a ton of enemies that will stream down the center that you must handle and destroy before the next wave, and so on and so forth. You'll notice at the top of the screen, when you engage the fight, there is a little meter that fills up that will show you how far along the next tower is from opening up and allowing players to go into it. So you can't simply just start and run up the towers and push the fight into the next phase. You have to wait a while and deal with some of these creatures down here. So before you even begin the fight, you should decide how you want to split your raid up. And we found it was best to do this based on the type of damage that the players deal, specifically whether they do a lot of AE damage or not. So players that have good AE should stay down in the main pathway pretty much. So Shadow Priests, Elemental Shamans, Warlocks, stuff like that are good down here. In addition, casters are a little bit preferential to melee in the main platform because of the movement of the creatures. So split up your raid accordingly. If you have players that are better at cleave damage or bursting on single targets, which are often melee players, then you want to send those players to the tower group. So for our raid, we had a pretty simple split. Mostly melee were in the tower group, so it's the first group or top group in my raid frames there, along with our balanced druid as well. So we left our hunter, our paladin tank, shadow priest, elemental shaman down below to deal with all the adds here. So again, find a split that works well for you. The number of adds in the tower are not going to be as nearly as high as the number that are coming down in this area here. And the tower mobs are all grouped up as well. So it's really good for cleave melee types to deal with. So once you've decided who's going to do what, now it's just a matter of dealing with all these adds. And let me tell you, there are a lot of add types. Far too many to list or go through the specifics here. But the basic goal is to prioritize certain spawns over others, make sure you handle those properly, and then the rest can just kind of be ignored or cleaned up with AE damage. So things that are really important are war banners, for example. When those are dropped, make sure your DPS kill those immediately. Other things that are important are the title shaman, because they try to do a heal as well as drop healing tide totem. So make sure those are killed quickly, interrupted, that kind of thing. And then in addition to that, the bone crushers are really important. Not necessarily to kill them right away, but they will rush toward one of the helpful NPCs down here. And when they do so, they'll stand there facing the NPC and basically channel fracture, which stuns them and does a huge amount of damage over 5 seconds. So the best thing you can do is when a bone crusher charges an NPC, stun it. That stun will interrupt the fracture cast, and then it will just go back to the tank that had threat, or the tank can just taunt it away if needed. But if you don't stun it or interrupt that bone crusher while it's doing fracture, the NPCs will die very quickly. And not only is it part of the achievement to keep them alive, but they are helpful in some ways. So try to do that. Oh, and another really important priority mob for the pathway team is the Demolisher. This is a pretty infrequent spawn. Basically, it will pop up shortly after one of the towers activates, and it's just a vehicle that with about 10 million health that will turn toward the tower and start to bombard it. And while it's bombarded, every time it hits the tower, everyone on the tower will be stunned for about a half a second or a second, which is really annoying to deal with. So make sure your pathway team prioritizes that Demolisher. You may even want to use small DPS cooldowns. So if you look in the left of the screen here as I turn again, there you can see the Demolisher just for a brief moment coming down there. So if your pathway team kills that quickly, then the tower team won't be stunned nearly as often, and they should be able to survive much easier. So dealing with the tower, when you have the meter at the top indicate that the tower is almost open, you should send your tower team near the door to get ready to go in so you can go as quickly as possible. So we went so that we're in front of the tower around 95% or so. And then we just follow our tank up. So he's training the mobs at the bottom of the tower all the way up to the top so we can more efficiently kill everything. So we're just area of affecting them down, basically. We're prioritizing the sort of flame slinger guys so that they don't shoot the people down below as much. And then once they're dead, then we can worry about the main lieutenant, who is sort of the mini boss here on the tower, as well as everything else. Now, one thing to be careful of is the lieutenant uses a knockback ability, which is that cone attack. And this is cast pretty frequently. So right there, actually, you may have seen that I was stunned briefly, a little pop-up in the center. That stun is from the Demolisher that I mentioned before. So if it doesn't die fast enough, the tower team can potentially be stunned in an unavoidable situation where the knockback from the lieutenant will automatically hit them. They can't really avoid it. So I could have maybe used my monk stun break there to get out, but it's a really short time window in any case. So make sure the Demolisher dies quick so the tower team doesn't have trouble with that. Otherwise, it's pretty basic. So here we're on the second tower. Process is pretty much the same. The lieutenant is different, but, mechanically there's not a whole lot to change. So we're going to the top again. And once everything's up here, our DPS start to kill the archer guys at the edges, while the tank kind of gathers everything in the center. And I'm helping him DPS as well as kind of staying middle, so it's easier to dodge the cone. Because it's a cone, obviously, the further you are to the side, the further you have to move to avoid that cone attack. And similarly, if you get hit, you'll be knocked off. Now, once all the creatures up here are killed, that gun becomes usable by the players. So what you'll want to do is have your tank, ideally I think tank is best, stay up here and use the gun. And they can actually shoot the drakes that are all around you, which will prevent them from hitting the raid, which is very nice. So for the first tower especially, the tank will want to stay up there pretty much as long as there are drakes to fire at, until the next tower is about to activate. There's no need for tank swaps down below or anything like that, so your tank that's in the pathway team can handle everything just fine. However, in the second tower, once all the mobs in the second tower are killed, then it's time to push into the next phase of the fight and activate Galakras. So this being our first try at this, we didn't really realize it, but you actually have to shoot Galakras with both guns at the same time, and then she will get pissed off and come down. So the best way to do this is, once the second tower is cleared, send one of the DPS players, or it could be your healer, but DPS is probably safer, up to the first tower again, while the tank is still in the second tower in the gun there. And so you have two players in the guns at the same time, one on each. And then once the pathway team is ready, they've cleared out the mobs down there, or nearly cleared the current wave, have both gun players shoot Galakras at the same time. And having done so, she will activate and the next phase will begin. So that's really the tower mechanics. They're quite simple. Really, it's just about killing the mobs quickly, dodging that cone attack, killing the Demolisher downstairs so that those players aren't stunned, and doing it as quickly as you can. So once you start phase 2, you'll fight Galakras by herself after you deal with any remaining adds. And mechanically, this fight is pretty simple. There are only a couple abilities, and it acts sort of as a soft enrage. The damage to the raid will increase over time during the phase. Now, let me just say right off the bat that this video is extremely messy for this phase. This was the first time we'd done it, and it didn't work. The strategy I had laid out just didn't work very well. So the way I kind of do fights is when we haven't seen them, I try to estimate what possible strategies might be. And on the screen here, you can see the diagram that I made for the strategy we're using in the fight here. And it just didn't work. It was based on the idea that the orbs that she shoots out would be low enough damage that we could soak them with 2 players. And this would allow the raid to basically never have to move to deal with the orbs. And as you'll see in the video, especially if you watch the mumble version, which is just a straight kill, it doesn't work out. It's just extremely messy. So, knowing is half the battle. Instead, this was the other strategy that we also came up with that we didn't try, and it didn't seem fair to make the raid wipe just to go through this process again and actually do a clean strategy. So on the screen, though, that's the diagram for the other method that is actually the one that would work. So I'll explain this one, and this is one of those situations you'll just have to do as I say, not as I do kind of thing. So anyway, let's talk about this method. Okay, so the actual strategy you'll want to use for phase 2 is just a stack method, basically. And again, don't do what you see in the video, just use the diagram and the explanation. So Galakras has 2 basic abilities in this phase. The first is a pulsing flame. So basically she just pulses fire damage to the raid, and this damage increases over time. So this is sort of a soft enrage mechanic. However, the main ability is Flames of Galakron. And this is a fireball sort of orb that will target a random raid member. And after about 5 seconds, it will reach them and explode at their location. However, during its travel period, any player that it passes through will reduce the damage of the final explosion. However, players that pass through also gain a stacking dot debuff that basically deals fire damage every second to them per stack. So it's 30,000 damage per second per stack, and it lasts 15 seconds. So you can see sort of from her mouth the line that shoots out toward players that indicates who's being targeted by the next flame. So right there, our druid is being targeted, and sort of some of our melee step in front of it to soak it up. And that's the basic mechanic of it. So players are randomly selected to be targeted, and after targeting, you wait a few seconds for the flame to actually shoot out, and anyone within the path of that ball will soak up some of the explosion damage, but in turn gain a stack of the 15-second dot. So let's talk about it, the diagram here and how this works. So the red square there is Galakras, the boss, and the blue square, or the circle, is your current tank. The orange is your entire raid stacked up in melee range, or thereabouts, behind the boss. And then we have 2 raid markers, the green and the yellow. The basic idea is that any player that is targeted by the orb, so the actual beam indicates that they're the target of the next orb, they will move behind the raid stack to the yellow raid marker. And you don't have to be very far behind. 5 or 10 yards is plenty. All it has to ensure is that the orb will pass through the orange raid clump. That's where everyone is standing. And that will ensure that everyone that's at the orange raid clump reduces the fireball damage because it passes through them, but they also gain a stack of the stacking dot. Once the orb actually travels to and hits the player that moved to the yellow marker, they move back to the raid position at the orange spot, and this process keeps repeating. New players that are targeted move back a few yards to the yellow, and once it goes off, they move forward back to the raid clump, just with everyone else. So this is fine and dandy. This will reduce the explosion damage from the orbs nearly the maximum that's possible. You could reduce it a little bit more if you put the tank with the raid stacked up, so basically the boss is facing you. And if you want a little bit less damage on the boss, but a little more survival, then you can certainly do that. But if you just want to face the boss away and use one fewer players, then that's fine as well. Now from here, the question is, well, what happens when your stacks get too high from the dot? Because the orbs come out faster than every 15 seconds, so the dot is going to keep stacking up for the most part on players it hits. Well, that's what the green marker's for, and it can be on either side. But the basic idea is at a certain threshold of dot stacks, and this is going to be up to you, your raid, and your healers to decide. Players that reach that threshold of dot stacks move out to the side away from the raid so that they're no longer in the path of the flame. So, for example, if you reach your threshold of whatever it is, say 6 stacks, you would step out to the green marker on the side, and as long as you are not the target of the next flame orb or 2, you can stay here on this side and not be hit by any of the flame orbs that are passing through the rest of the raid, because they won't go in that direction. So then you stay here for the 15 seconds, drop your stack, and then once your stack is dropped, you move back into the raid position at the orange location and continue to soak up. So ideally, you'll have a rotation of players doing this. At any given moment, 1 or 2 players will be at green, resetting their stacks, while the rest of the raid is at the orange marker, soaking it up. And as long as you decide a good threshold for that, again, we didn't get a chance to test this method, so I know it works because the math works out properly, but I don't know what the actual stack value would be that would be appropriate for any given raid. So you'll just have to decide, a base level of 5, 6, 7 stacks, and then try it out and see how the damage feels. And if the dot damage is pretty low still at those numbers, then you can go even higher. Or if it feels too high, then you'll want to do a reset at a lower stack count. But the overall method will work just fine with this setup. So that is how you handle phase 2. Other than that, you just want to use all your DPS and healing cooldowns, rotate them as appropriate. And you also probably want to pull the boss down closer to the NPCs. We pulled her up here because this is where our raid markers were. It was open space. But again, that strategy doesn't work. So pull her down closer to the NPCs and they'll help you out during this phase. Especially you can keep her in the flame strike from the mage NPC and all that stuff. So that really covers everything for Galakras normal. It's not all that difficult, but it's a pretty fun fight. So just get the raid splits going properly, your tower teams worked out, handle the ad priorities in the pathway, and then once you get into phase 2, use the diagram strategy to keep your stacks at a reasonable level and reduce the damage from the explosions. As always, good luck, and thanks for watching.